Welcome all to the Royal Bride Godmother podcast. I'm Grace, your life coach and spiritual mentor. Welcome. Today we're going to touch on a topic about narcissism, Victorian literature, and we are going to talk about one of my favorite Victorian male specimens, Heathcliff. So, how toxic is Heathcliff? So, in Wuthering Heights, for those of you who have read Wuthering Heights, and for those of you who have seen the movie Wuthering Heights, we find a very disturbing yet alluring character in Heathcliff, the anti-hero, villain, sadistic, cruel master of Wuthering Heights. So we tend to fall in love with the idea of Heathcliff as we read the novel. Of course, not every woman who reads the novel will fall in love with the idea of Heathcliff, but I find that a lot of young women in general idealize, romanticize Heathcliff. Now, in Wuthering Heights, it's Isabella, Edgar Linton's sister, who calls Heathcliff, her brother's rival and sister-in-law's ex-lover, she calls him an honorable soul, but she doesn't know him. But I found it interesting that at the beginning of Wuthering Heights, at the preface, Emily Bronte described her Heathcliff as so. She says, quoting Emily, "We should say that he was the form of a man animated by the life of a demon, a ghoul, an afreet. And I don't know if it is right or advisable to create beings like Heathcliff. I hardly think it is." I found that telling. So for those who have read this novel, Wuthering Heights, we know that Heathcliff is that heroic antagonist. He's often classified as a romantic hero. The novel itself is often classified as a romantic classic novel, love story. But if we examine this so-called great love story with more mindfulness and less fantasy and laced with our high school girlish, feverish dreams, we see a story of revenge, of injustice, of cruelty, of madness, and we see in Heathcliff a monster. Now, he begins with no background. He is found, he's an abandoned child. We can assume that he's gypsy. His rescuer happens to own the property called Wuthering Heights, and it is in Wuthering Heights where Heathcliff meets the love of his life, Catherine. They seem like soulmates, but Catherine, although she loves Heathcliff, she does abandon him and prefers to marry a man of great social position. Now, for Heathcliff, he goes from being the golden child of his rescuer to being reduced by Kathy's brother Hindley to a mere servant at Wuthering Heights. Now, after Kathy abandons him, Heathcliff escapes, he makes his fortune, and he returns to take his revenge on all of those who abused him, mistreated him, and are also hindered his love for Catherine. Filled with hatred, cruelty, spite, revenge, he becomes sadistic. He was already probably sadistic. He's a potential killer. He's a potential murderer. He tries to kill Isabella. So I find that the one who takes on more of Heathcliff's hatred and vengeance is the young Hareton, who happens to be Heathcliff's stepbrother's abuser's son. He's cursed with being Hindley's son. He has that misfortune. And so Heathcliff takes all of his hatred out on this young man, Hareton. That everything that Hindley did to Heathcliff, he turns Hareton into this illiterate, uncultured, very primitive, though noble-hearted young man. And he happens to be my favorite character in Wuthering Heights. Now, I found this article written by Gentis Afrina, who wrote a psychoanalytic approach to Heathcliff. And I'd like to quote a very one of my favorite paragraphs from the entire article, which says, because Heathcliff harbored hatred due to the violence that he received, the acts of discrimination by bad people to him, he has a mental condition in which he has an inflated sense of his own importance, a deep need for excessive attention and admiration, troubled relationships, and a lack of empathy for others. He has extreme confidence that lies in a fragile self-esteem that's vulnerable to the slightest criticism. He has trouble handling anything he perceives as criticism, and he can become impatient or angry when he does not receive special treatment. He feels depressed and moody because he falls short of perfection. He has significant interpersonal problems and easily feels slighted. He has secret feelings of insecurity, of shame, of vulnerability and humiliation. He reacts with rage or contempt and tries to belittle other people to make himself appear superior. And these are the signs that can be very telling when it comes to narcissistic personality disorder. Now, the article is written, I believe, I think it's written in Arabic, so it's a little bit difficult to translate it. But so far, this is what I got. Now, personally, I think that Heathcliff is what I call a demon in the body of an extremely handsome prince. Now, recently speaking with several clients, this topic has come to mind. So specifically this talk tonight is mainly for the queens, the ladies who've had their souls crushed by a demon in a Prince Charming's body. And like Isabella, who is Heathcliff's self-loathing wife, many of us made the mistake of falling in love with the abuser's representative, because bad boys have representatives, narcissists have representatives, even the good guys have representatives. But we ended up making the mistake of falling for the abuser's representative, attributing, much like Isabella, non-existing qualities to that demon in princely garb. Now, that's quoting Heathcliff to Nellie about his wife Isabella. This is what Heathcliff has to say. I feel like I'm interviewing this character. She abandoned them under a delusion, he answered, picturing in me a hero of romance and expecting unlimited indulgences from my chivalrous devotion. I can hardly regard her in the light of a rational creature. So obstinately has she persisted in forming a fabulous notion of my character and acting on the false impressions she cherished. Well, that's Heathcliff for you. That's what he has to say about Isabella. Now, this reminded me of narcissistic men and how these mainly covert narcissists, they come in as angels of light, as saviors, as providers, as caregivers, as the Prince Charming. And sometimes they appear as extremely handsome, and other times they may not even be our physical type, but because of that charm, that apparent chivalry, we perceive them as princes. They could be, we're thinking dark, tall, and handsome, and 6'2", and the narcissist comes in 5'5", but he happens to convince us that he is our type. That we convince ourselves through all of this charm and this love bombing and the apparent chivalry and how much of a gentleman he appears to be. So we delude ourselves, really. I mean, the first step to realizing we have an issue is to understand that we do delude ourselves. We convince ourselves, despite how far he may be from our type, we convince ourselves he is the man for us. Now, their love bombing typically can last from weeks to months to even a year or more, depending on the narcissist. Some narcissists are very lazy, and others are far more astute. But also, men in general seems to have like a 3-month run. And they don't necessarily have to be bad boys. If they're looking to have a good time and not necessarily the bad boy type, but they're looking to have fun, there seems to be that 3-month run of some kind of incessant love bombing or just attention giving. Not in that sinister narcissistic way, but more like he's trying to get something and he has that 3-month run. He's not a predator per se. He may be an ambusher, but not a predator. So, I mean, I think it's very important that we don't confuse the narcissist with the bad boy. The narcissist will shower the woman with gifts, with trips, with this incessant attention, seeming affection, boom, 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 boom. And like the Bible says, charm is deceitful, beauty is vain. But I find that we live in a world which glamorizes that sinister charmer. The society we've grown up in praises the serial killer. It sensationalizes the serial killer's acts. I mean, we have details and details of all of the heinous things that serial killers do, and yet we forget the names of the victims. The names of the victims are left in oblivion. I mean, who remembers Jeffrey Dahmer's victims? Who remembers Ted Bundy's victims? Who remembers the victims' names at Columbine? And that's just to name a few. In this world, in this society, it seems to be the sadist who gets the limelight. The abuser gets the limelight. Shows like Lucifer, the Hannibal Lecter franchise, they glamorize, they glorify the devil incarnate, the charming devil incarnate. And not to mention the slew of horror slasher films. Now, in Victorian literature, psychopaths like Heathcliff are glamorized. They get romanticized. So they pass from being these sadistic destroyers on the page of the novel to romantic heroes in the inexperienced, naive female's mind. In the lab of media conditioning, the young woman is taught to feel and desire the allure of the classic quintessential bad boy. She's taught to want him. She's somehow conditioned to covet him. With TV and movies, we get faces to the bad boys, so they become more real, more alluring still. Let's talk Damon in The Vampire Diaries, Lestat in Anne Rice's Interview with the Vampire, Spike in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Norman Bates, that quintessential psychopath in Psycho, Dr. Lecter. This is just to name a tip of the toxic iceberg. Now, when we're young, I don't think we see any harm in that scruffy leather jacket bad boy. John Travolta as Danny Zuko, he made girls crazy in his day. And I find that even Edward Fairfax Rochester in Jane Eyre is a reformed bad boy. We can say he's a reformed bad boy. So there is this allure of the quintessential bad boy. And I remember years ago, I read 2 polls. I watched a few videos on this, and I recall the vote for most seductive bad boy in Disney was Judge Claude Frollo's character in Hunchback of Notre Dame. And when faced with choosing the Beast or the Prince in Disney's Beauty and the Beast, the votes went higher for the Beast as the Beast, to remain as the Beast and not to be transformed as the Prince. And this is how many young and older women preferred him. For those of us who were raised heavily on Disney, when faced with considering Gaston Leroux's Phantom of the Opera, when faced with the option of choosing Eric the Phantom or Raoul, the gentleman, the aristocrat, Eric's the genius, Raoul is the aristocrat gentleman, many young and older women voted for Eric, the sadistic genius, musical genius, the one with the voice of the angel. Christine should have stayed with Eric the Phantom. That's according to polls, many of them that have been conducted through the years on the nets. Hundreds, if not thousands, of fan fiction has been written about Christine staying with Eric. I mean, there's even a musical by Andrew Lloyd Webber called Love Never Dies, where we do see Christine have Eric's child and passing it off as Raoul's child. Shameless. In the Italian-Spanish production of Beauty and the Beast, now this example right here, I mean, the movie was very good looking, but this idea that it passes off, and I don't care if I sound like I am exaggerating this is just not healthy. So the Beast in this film is not an animal. He's a prince. A scruffy, handsome prince who's deeply wounded, sadistic. He's a womanizer. His heart broken. So he turns misogynist. He's a drug addict, self-loathing. Oh, poor baby. Yet the story ends with Belle somehow living happily ever after with a man who needed character reformation. He needed extensive therapy and a rehab center. And also, I insist, he truly needed Jesus Christ in his life. Now, Hollywood and even some Victorian literature, not all of it, as we're going to explore in part 2, some Victorian literature, some literature glaze over one pertinent yet sometimes even an omitted fact that a man is a human. A man is a human. He's not an idealization. He is a human. Humans are spirits. Humans have souls. Souls are extremely complicated. And I feel like we live in a society that dehumanizes men. And I think that comes with the rise of this very man-hating feminism. Now, what we see in film itself is a representative of the representative. It is a representative. It is a romanticization and idealization of the idea of the bad boy, rich or poor bad boy. It's like a glamorization of devils in angelic wear. I mean, it's like Victoria's Secret, only with men. So whereas the bad girl also gets that glamorization treatment, she's glorified in spite of her wickedness and even her narcissistic personality. And usually she's this sexy, beautiful vixen, but she's a man-eater who exploits men, and her beauty is the bait. She's like a siren in mythology. But the bad boy in our bad boy culture, he's desirable, it seems, because of his womanizing, heartbreaking ways, these tendencies which make him sexually alluring, though morally repulsive. We know he's no good. We know he will break our hearts into a million pieces. He will extract our souls, extract our tears. Yet it is this, somehow there's this presumption that comes with realizing that cold, hard fact that he is no good. He can break our hearts. Yet there's this presumption that what if we can change him? What if underneath that rugged, heartbreaking exterior, there's this heart of gold, there's this soulmate, there's this noble man? So we delude ourselves. So we see him as this poor, tortured, wounded soul. He just needs someone to love him, coddle him, nurture him, support him, understand him. Oh, the list gets exhausting. So we reside within the delusion that we're playing Pygmalion to Galateo, or Pygmalia to Galateo. But even the nice boy resents a woman trying to change him. There is this film out on Netflix. It's called He's All That. It's a role reversal of that late 90s film, She's All That. When I didn't even watch He's All That. I've watched She's All That. I haven't watched He's All That. But when I saw the title to that and I saw a girl wants to change a guy, oh no, bad idea. Bad idea. But the idea is still put out there. So even the nice boy resents a woman trying to change him. And if he's broken, queens, do not try to fix him. Get yourself a refund, shake the dust off your feet, leave him in your dust, and move on. If not, I'm afraid you're going to be looking at migraines, sleepless nights, holding that box of Kleenex, FBI raids on Facebook where you're playing Scully and Mulder because you're trying to find and catch that bad boy's hand in the cookie jar. You're going to be faced with frequent drive-bys, his house. Oh, I was just in the neighborhood. Now, is that how you really want to waste? Not spend, because you're not spending, you're not investing, you're wasting your precious time and energy, queen. But subconsciously, that bad boy is constantly programmed into you, into us. He's stenciled on our subconscious. From Aladdin to Judge Frollo for some reason, to Damon, to Spike, to the Beast in Beauty and the Beast. I mean, come on, that's the so-called whenever you have like a story of a bad boy and a good girl, and the bad boy falls for the good girl, you get that tag of, oh, it's a Beauty and the Beast tale. We're programmed to want the beast in the man. So while you know that a womanizer or player or that pickup artist, he's bad news for your well-being, he's bad news for those stress levels, for your blood pressure. I mean, when you're young, you can handle this stuff, but by the time you're pushing into your 40s and your 50s, it's not a good idea. But I don't even recommend it when you're in your teens to be messing around with a bad boy. So let's face it, your body, because after all, he loves women. So your body's also going to take the hit. But you somehow can't shake off the pesky desire of having the quintessential Heathcliff, the bad boy. I remember way back in the day, I used to have a pen pal in Sweden. We used to love this idea of Heathcliff. We, of course, were teenagers, so we would go hours online. Those were the days, just talking about Heathcliff. I think she was a little more obsessed with him than I was, to confess. But as we were both discovering the novel, The World of Wuthering Heights, we were swooning over that Afrit in that ghoul in the prince's body. So it's no wonder why we later attracted a real deal, abusive, toxic bad boy or a shape-shifting narcissist. Now, not all narcissists are shapeshifters, but a lot of narcissists are spiritual shapeshifters. They wear many masks, many identities. But of course, I do have clients who've reported that they've seen the face of their lover change, contort. The eyes go from an oceanic blue to a pitch black, dilated black pupils, their voices distorting to something otherworldly. I mean, this stuff is real. Now, we're not going to generalize. Does this mean that every bad boy we meet is a devil in disguise? Hardly. I'll say hardly. At best, he's a rascal, a scoundrel. At worst, he is a fiend. Possibly. But scoundrel or fiend, I feel that society has a lot to do with this. It programs women to desire that bad boy through a steady diet of glorification, glamorization of the quintessential, heartbreaking, drop-dead gorgeous, like that Republica song says, drop-dead gorgeous, devil-may-care type. He's the user and not the giver, the taker, not the giver. He's the sensual lover with prowess, and he's not the sensitive romantic soul. He's the tortured and brooding man who seems to need a female savior. He seems to need her, but he really doesn't need saving. If he don't want to save himself, and if he can't save himself, and if he doesn't want to save himself, he doesn't need anybody to try and save him. He'll just break your heart. He'll give you hell on earth. So we're conditioned to want this tortured, brooding male, not the stable, responsible, hardworking man who may say a little, he may be stoic, but whose actions speak louder. The bad boy is just, he seems to be more alluring. And it seems that nice guys, and I don't think good guys should be confused with pushover, spineless types, milquetoasts. I'm talking about genuinely good men. They seem to finish last, as the saying goes, because society conditions females to prefer that bad guy and not the nice guy, not the good man. But I've found that it's only after she's had her heart broken, after a string of bad boys, that she finds herself pining years later for the nice guy she turned down one day for the bad boy, wondering how her life could have been if she'd preferred the good guy instead of the string of bad guys she gave her heart and her body over to. Because now she's at a stage in her life where she wants stability, she craves calm, she craves peace, she wants a responsible, hardworking alpha provider, a good father figure for her children if she wants to have a family. And while I don't think we should blame society entirely, I do think society has a lot to do with it. The way that we are conditioned through all of this entertainment, from books to soap operas to movies. But we must acknowledge other factors, like lack of a good father figure in the girl's household, little to no male validation in her home, daddy issues. She may have had some form of a dad in the picture, but she still has daddy issues. There's so many other factors. We can't deny, however, that she was also directly or indirectly influenced. She was raised, she was taught, she was conditioned to view that handsome, mysterious, devil-may-care type as a more interesting alternative. to the secure, safe. That word right there, safe. Chivalrous man. Even if he's not chivalrous, just safe and secure. So this concludes part 1 of our talk. In part 2, we're going to continue talking about that bad boy. We're also going to examine the good boy a little bit. And we're going to explore an example in literature, but this time written from the point of view of a man. So thank you all so very much for joining me to the end. Thank you for giving me your time, for giving me your energy, because listening takes energy, by the way. It takes energy. And I hope that this gets you thinking. Join the discussion. If there's so many bad boys. If you look up all the bad boys in literature, in movies, I think they trump the good boys that we have. So I think it's time that we start raising good boys. The bad boys, I believe, are just misguided. I don't think that we're not to confuse the bad boy with the narcissist, by the way. They're very different. And I don't think we should confuse the bad boy either with the pickup artist. But I do believe that there is good in the bad boy. It's just not our responsibility to try and change them and try to save them and try to find the good in them. I mean, the problem sometimes I think is that we romanticize the potential and we don't see what's really there. And so we fool ourselves. Fools for love. All right. So until next time, I'm Grace, you're a spiritual coach, a spiritual mentor, and I will speak to you soon. Shalom. Salam.